So it's been a while since I've done a string of videos. I used to do this a few years ago on my other Facebook page. I thought that maybe, even though a lot of this stuff has been seen in photographic stills, I don't think there's been like actual video of either progress on this type of thing or explaining some of the artwork involved, the periods involved, and so on. So I just thought that I would show, I have a few things here, not everything is here because there are some things that are actually already installed in the truck, like certain embellishments on the ceiling that I won't be able to show you. So, I don't know, I thought I'd lay a few things out here and talk about the pieces a little bit. Each of these pieces are something that took hours worth of work on and attention to detail, and then I'll show like a couple of other things. So, firstly, is the period and theming. If you're not familiar with 1970s vanning, a lot of these vans would typically feature like medieval fantasy, sometimes space age stuff as well, like something that would be more comparable to like Masters of the Universe, where you have these elements of Middle Ages mixed with, you know, lasers and electronics and things of that nature. For me, initially, when I did decide to spruce the vehicle up and kind of take action with changing the interior, is I wanted to kind of focus on realism, with some theme park fantasy as well, where you're taking realistic elements and making it a caricature or a little cartoonish. Like basically, if you think of Disney type of design, which is very heavily based in, well, also toward Victorian or Baroque, depending on what region you're in. So to take a mix of those two elements to where you're taking a mostly realistic approach and then just putting just enough of a spin on it to be more in line with a theme park, and it's a lot of eclectic things going on. The other thing is to not just turn it into a typical 1970s van where you're basically making a clone or a kind of mimic of that period, but to leave things that were essential and common in conversion vans or in high-top conversion vans. Basically, you went from boogie vans in the 70s to where it was about camping out, a lot like swingers and getting high, stuff like that. And then it became kind of a hot rod thing, so it was more than just having happenings. It became about customization. Then, you know, there were originally happenings like van meets, and then that obviously evolved now into a time where it's like a car show where it's a van show. So it's not so much about they still, you know, play it as a happening, that particular generation, but they're a lot older, so it's not quite the same thing because you're looking at it with an eye for it being about a collector's piece, things of antiquity, like a different time in America, just like all car shows. Like if you had a modern Mustang meetup or any kind of car, it's a little different. They might be street racing, just hanging out. It's not quite the same thing, but that's what vanning started as, was basically camping out. From there, they started to make conversion vans, which were basically light RVs. So instead of a full B class, you have certain amenities and luxuries. And as those generations got older, they started to reflect that. So kind of if you think of an RV, for an older couple, they'll have two twin beds going on. So they're not even sleeping in the same bed. So conversion vans are a little more, suffice to say, typically on the geriatric end of styling and luxury. However, I grew up with one. Like a lot of people, that was kind of the new truckster, were conversion vans with TVs in them. We had a VCR, Nintendo. We actually went through a couple, an Econoline. We almost had a high-top Dodge Caravan. Before that, my grandfather had actual buses for touring with like band equipment. So that was kind of his evolution into it, and then road tripping down to the south in our high top, which at the time, for being, basically poor to middle class, it felt like too much of a luxury. Like when we first saw that high top come home and saw the TV in it, like I thought it was a rental. I didn't realize like, oh, this is going to be like you're going to be traveling in this a lot, even just to school. And I think that they kind of are one of those things where they're a luxury in the beginning and they get like a negative stigma towards certain types of people or classes of people. Same with automobiles. It's like at one point a Trans Am is a high-end sports car, like up there with a Corvette, but you spin it the wrong way and it becomes like a trailer park kind of thing or trope in films. So for me, there's nothing wrong with the original conversion vans. And actually, Ford stopped making the Econoline. They only do the Transit, which is more of a European platform. And with that, they have changed a little bit. Like, design has changed. A lot of things are minimalist. A lot of right angles, not a lot of curves, and definitely not a lot of attention to detail. And that's just how the times go. I think why vans were kind of medieval fantasy is there was a lot of neo-medieval things going on in that period as far as like furniture and design. Antiques were big. Like there was a boom in the 80s of people decorating with a lot of 19th century or turn of the century things. So that was like I think there was an antique boom. I would say now at my age, like I'm 36, so I was born in 86. I do remember that period being really little and that being kind of a thing where antiques were in. I think they were in again like 10 plus years ago. It even became like an element of hipsters. And hey, antiques are great. I don't care. I'm not judging anyone or what their clicks are or anything. I prefer attention to detail and great artwork and design. At least, something that requires a lot of work rather than a little work or something that's like printed out or something. So I didn't want to erase the original things in the conversion van where the van has, like there's hardwood. I'm pretty sure it's walnut. I'm not that good. Like I do a lot of woodwork and things now. I'm no expert on being able to look at certain woods. Like I can smell pine like that. I think everyone has that ability, which is one of the greatest smells in the world, by the way. Or even cutting into maple and hitting a pocket of sap with a jigsaw is like the other greatest smell. But either way, these vans would typically feature pre-cut hardwood elements. So like curtain valances, coffee tables, your entertainment center where the TV goes up top, and different kind of embellishments around to kind of make it feel more homey, or like a living room. And that's perfectly fine. It was perfectly luxurious. I'll tell you, for me personally, going in the direction that I did almost has less to do with cliches of the vanning community so much as what I do in my personal life. And one of the interests or hobbies I have is studying classical or classic architecture, particularly with different castles through time. Things from Master James all the way up to like Neuschwanstein or Stein. It's Frankenstein. And that's more as a realistic historical perspective in academia. I know that this helps in the fantasy world, to where, I'll watch Harry Potter or something, and I can pick out certain elements of eclecticism, of what's going on. Like, oh, this is Gothic, medieval, your basic period, like that still travels very, very far. But as far as embellishments, you get into, Baroque period things, Rococo, and so on. I think the Middle Ages being the most popular, and obviously to do the work of Baroque is a masterwork, is you have to be... I don't even know if there's a lot of fine artists out there. There probably are still, but I would say the trade has probably diminished over the last few decades. I did find an artist from the 70s that was teaching people how to paint like Rembrandt and so on, but if you're not familiar with Baroque artwork, it's probably one of the most insane things that you've ever seen. There's the technical complexities of, say, like Baroque period music, like classical from, just Bach, Beethoven, and so on, where there's a high amount of technical ability required to play these pieces, whether it's something simple for cello or a whole concerto. The painting and artwork is on that level. So I would say I definitely did not attain or wish to go that far, and I think if I had, it probably would have realistically been a little too frilly for the objective. It may have been humorous because of what the truck is, the engine and everything, to have these very fanciful things. I think one of my favorite things, like I also am kind of an enthusiast of flat rides or thrill rides, their production and manufacture, and one of my favorite rides is the Wave Swinger, and I find it amusing because you have this raw, gnarly, machine that is completely decorated in like German Baroque embellishments and paintings, and that to me is just a gorgeous ride. I just think it's amazing. Or carousels, for example. So I didn't want to go quite that far. There are some things I could point out that I did not create, so a lot of this sometimes is just decorating. I guess my way of bedazzling something, or what do they call that when they put like plastic gems on things? It's a bedazzle, right? So that's kind of basically what the idea was maintaining that it's a high top conversion van without tearing out everything, like still with respect. This is actually a Winnebago. So there were third parties, they take a van, Ford, Chevy, Dodge, They take a raw van and then they basically do their conversion. And conversion can be short for luxury conversion. There's high top luxury conversion, which mine is. And then the high tops have all sorts of different fiberglass molds, which actually overall, even though you're adding all the wood, it actually does save a lot of weight off of the roof. So you'd be surprised to know that my truck only weighs about 4,800 pounds, and it's almost 8 feet tall. If you're about 5.5 feet tall, you can fully comfortably stand up inside of it. But even someone my height, I can still duck down. Like, you can still walk inside. It's not like a regular van or an SUV where you have to completely crouch over. So it's pretty cool. So I'm going to show firstly like some custom elements and then things. Actually, one of the things you're seeing in the background here is a factory Winnebago item that's been basically decorated or modified for the theme. So again, on the theme, there's some under what am I trying to say? Basically, it is mostly, if you were to go inside of it, you would probably be swept with the fact that it feels like kind of a medieval castle or kind of old world luxury or European. It's definitely not like American colonial, as the factory hardwood would suggest, even though it is decorated. So that's the only item, like the curtain valances, that kind of make it different or eclectic. So the other thing that I tried to go for was, there were a couple of ideas. You have a plain medieval castle, right? Most of my influence comes off of castles on the Rhine. In Germany, like, I still study some English fortifications, but there's that many more well-preserved and still owned by families of castles, burgs, schlosses, whatever, even chateaus of France that you can see that are that much more well-preserved than some English examples. Like English and Irish castles, you're typically going to see more ruins than you are any full decor, so you can't get an idea of how they were decorated. Is a lot of people, for example, I think most people know this fact, but I think when a lot of people think of certain period, they think of an interior as just being brick and not having very colorful tapestries, and that's another thing that I'll get into as far as color choice. So there was that end of it as far as realism. The other end of it was Dracula. Okay, so that was kind of a thing where even the funny thing is there's a dual purpose of something like this. Like, these are, dragon fretwork that I've done. How is that standing for that long and now? Anyway, so, but Dragul is the dragon, and Vlad the Impaler was of the Order of the Dragon, but more to the fictional or semi-fictional account of the literature by Bram Stoker. So that was the other concept, is it being spooky enough or gothic enough to where it could be spun as, Dracula's castle. The other thing is you don't want it to be completely moody and brooding and dark the whole time. Like, yes, I am into that. Like, I'm a big horror enthusiast, particularly, again, in the Middle Ages and Old World stuff. So Dracula is probably one of my favorite pieces of literature. Favorite version of the movie is probably Coppola's, but that was the other thing. But at the same time, I wanted to make it ambiguous to where you can't really put an exact theme on what it is, but if you spun something one way or the other, it would appear that way. So let's say right now, this time of year, you could do certain lighting or do certain elements and add-ons that it would be like, oh wow, this is like something out of Dracula. Or even the Munsters coach was also kind of a piece of influence. But I wanted to exceed the Munsters coach in as far as attention to detail. Because, someone like George Barris, it's not to say they couldn't do this, but when you're working for TV is you don't have time to get into certain things. And castles and other things, it's all about showing wealth and luxury, and that means those pieces of art are going to appear to have taken that much more time than not. So that in a period before Baroque was about showing pure technical ability. It was about, colors and add-ons and so forth. So you're just constantly changing and adding more little details where you can. So that was a thought, and even if it could be spun as Christmas time, because I have like burgundy velvets, there's olive green velvets. The one color I realized separates red and green from Christmas was eggplant purple. And these are also the very, very medieval colors. There's a lot of colors going on here. Kind of like burgundy. This stain here is actually Cabernet. But these kind of off reds that aren't totally crimson. So we have deep burgundy crushed upholstery velvet. This is eggplant with a black crushed velvet. So basically burgundy, purples, an olive green, like really off greens. And obviously you can see kind of the mossy colors behind it. So that was one of the only rules to follow. And then we also have red mahogany stain. I still am using some of the Sedona stain. That's the more orange looking stuff. But that was like, a little too bright and happy, even though I liked it in the cab. But I have since changed my cab dashboard to being a deep burgundy. So I realize how long I've talked about this, but I at least wanted to make an audio-visual representation of some of the decisions, some of the work, and it's obviously not done yet. So that's the whole basis of this project. I'm in a year, well, not technically 4 years yet, but this is season 5 already. And the woodwork, the interior work, as an example, this double dragon piece, that's probably a 4-hour piece, maybe more, on the scroll saw. I guess it depends. I could probably do it a lot faster than that, but it's just crazy how fast time goes, and you don't realize how long you've actually been running a pattern or something. Alright, so now I'm actually going to show stuff. I know I just rambled, but I thought it was important to get a kind of intro and baseline and talk about some of the artistic decisions and kind of the whole concept here. And the one thing overall I will say is part of my reasoning to doing it the way that I am isn't to be a parody, it isn't to be funny, it's not really to look at, custom vans, again, like I said, clone that. It's totally a statement for a modern time to kind of lash out against minimalism and less attention to detail. There being less artisans out there working, making tangible things. Like, there is a whole movement of people that refer to themselves as makers, and I'm not taking anything away from that. Like, there's definitely still artisans, but in a popular or industrial world, I don't think it's that common, because it's something where you could be a production designer, a prop master, art designer, and so on, like in TV and film, and even theme parks. And, you know, there's a lot of insane haunted houses and things, so it is still alive. So I'm not saying that, I'm the voice of that, I'm responsible for calling out certain designs and minimalism, but those are very particular for theming. This is kind of, like I said, like when they do like neo-medieval and things that have come back, this is totally to bring this into a modern age. Like, I understand it ends up looking like theming, but I really wanted to make it as realistic as possible. Again, with some cartoonish elements here and there, but I wanted to kind of make phony antiques, basically, while being highly original. So my favorite thing, I think, I mean, it's hard, like this and the thing next to it, I've put this thing in the background of so many things. People have seen this thing so many times because I'm so pleased with how this ended up. So what this is it's basically two doors for the rear cabinet above the back cabinet of the van. So basically across from the TV. So it is kind of this was an important piece. I originally painted the original door that's a single swing out that swings upward, and it just didn't look right. It was really cheesy. And finally, I had an old cabinet that I left outside, and I was looking at it, and it was like, oh, made in I'm saying that as if it said it to me, but it had print that said it was made in the USA. It's a really nice, high-quality cabinet. So this was my way to kind of feel less bad about it and turn it into basically, like a butterfly worth of the cabinet. Now, this is something where this is purely based on actual medieval work that I've studied. One of the things I will say, though, that I didn't mention so far is in the cab, there are some elements of it being a galleon as well. So there's like a Jolly Roger in the ceiling and certain things. That only seemed appropriate because it's a motion castle, which is basically what a galleon is. It's just by sea. So I had to that was part of the ambiguity was, okay, it can be a pirate ship and a castle because a conversion van it's not just about cruising in it, it's about parking and hanging out inside of it. So that's why the back has certain elements that I'm going to show you. And the front, again, like you'll see I love to use brass stampings on all of my pieces that I can find, especially if I can find actual period correct ones. So this was basic cabinet backing, and actually I don't think the wood that makes the beams was a part of it. So I don't remember. So the only thing surviving of the cabinet may be the backing. And I don't even know. I started to paint on the back of these like a castle, and I'm okay with acrylic, but this just came out a little bad, and I don't know. It's just, I tried to clone the image. I thought about different things with it. Some of it came out okay. I do okay on like terrain, but it also depends on the surface you're working with. So I tried, but I thought that was a nice touch. But it's okay and it's bad at the same time. Like in some ways it looks like an elementary school painting. So I did like the concept. It's not, like, I don't know, I'm not so eager to paint over it, but that was like one touch that I decided to do. So you take the backings, everything was measured out. So I had a foam template that you can just get at the Dollar Tree, like foam board. And from there, I sized it up to the actual cabinet. You know, I made all of these beams, if you will, and these are not actually attached by clavos. If you don't know what clavos are, those are these basically Spanish or medieval nail. So that's an actual nail. And because this is shallow and isn't as thick as, say, like a chest or something that where you'd actually use these, is these were snipped off, pilot holes were drilled, and then I hope that I used Gorilla Glue. Like, this may be regular super glue, and that may need to change. I think one of them is actually loose. They're probably not going anywhere, so that's why, you know, make sure the pilot hole is tight enough to where these either have to be hammered or pressed in tightly. So that was part of getting that look, and these are authentic, like that's metal. The other thing was to decorate it a little bit, is I wanted, you know, I know like typically lions are, like the House of Windsor, for example, like the English royal family, even though technically the Windsors are from Germany, so they're actually German Welsh, but lions are common in that house. So I thought that for this I would go with something realistic. I found these. I don't know if I would have preferred patina on them. I do like that this is not just kind of aged looking, but I have used like a triple thick glaze aerosol that you probably can't see, and I love that stuff. I love having everything wood, like almost glass-like. The camera is really not picking up how cool that looks, but I chose these because they have this kind of ghost-like appearance in the eyes, and they're actually from the 60s. So these are now technically, at least, well, I don't know, is 60s technically antique now? But I would say they are vintage, so you won't really find these in a modern stamping. So I try to do that with everything, right? So a lot of the brass filigree that I use is from the 40s, and things that may have been throwbacks to either Middle Ages or at least Baroque. So I thought those were really cool. Being from the 60s they kind of made me think of vanning and swingers and stuff like that, so I thought that these worked really nice. Or something, they kind of remind me of maybe like the Bob Marley knocker in A Christmas Carol. And these are attached with escutcheon nails. That's typically what you use. They are really tricky if they're short enough, but that's how a stamping is. And I don't think I glued these, they're just on there really nice. So just with one short little nail, that's all that took. So Clavos, brass stampings, and to kind of set the whole thing off, and this is where it becomes eclectic, right? This is a cast iron cabinet slide latch, and this is actually a Victorian latch. So this stamping is actually over 100 years old, so it's actually from the late 1800s. Now, ooh, that needs to be tightened a little. The thing is with that is you could see that and see everything going on and say, oh, that's incorrect. There's medieval, but then there's Victorian. Why that's not incorrect is if you take a tour or go in some of these old castles that a family still owns, like especially in Germany, you may find stuff like that, where maybe in medieval times it could have been like a rope that went around a knob. So you may find technological advancements like this. I just think it looks really awesome on there. It's not too expensive, but if you are doing a project like this and you want authenticity And for this to look like a realistic antique and piece, like, you have to get the real thing. You're not going to find that in like a, Lowe's collection or Target or anything like that. You have to really go antiquing. That's probably, I got that on eBay, so. But yeah, that's my rear cabinet doors. I love how they look in there. Plus, if you look in my van, I have the 2 lanterns up there with everything else going on. So that's why this always appears in the backdrop of things that I'm working on, or even my business for my facials is I have this, I use this as a backdrop. I'd like to do more like this, or even a full chest, but the thing was, I'd never done it. It was just done with a jigsaw. I kind of deliberately left some gaps in there to kind of show weathering, as wood is going to change over time and warp and stuff. And again, these aren't actually nailed. Like, this is actually wood glue with super glue, and I had to clamp it. It did warp up in some spots, but it is, other than that, it's basically rock solid. I love how this turned out, so that made me really happy from the original. The only thing that's weird, it does go, the whole cabinet it goes over is done in eggplant velvet, which, it's a little odd, so I may have to add some embellishments to the face so it doesn't look completely goofy. So, let me see here. I think I'll just set this aside. So yeah, this was the first thing that I did, I want to say. If you want to see the painting, if you can call it that. I did change the castle. It looked better before, and then I wanted to put it in a night scene. So, like, the sunset came out okay, like, using that technique, and then I started to put, like, a body of water, and it didn't look right, so. It probably looks worse on camera because the auto adjusts is, like, turning the iris and shutter way down, iris wide open. But anyway, that's that for now. Nothing on the front of it I'm going to change, just possibly the painting or like flocking over it. Alright. Now this next thing wasn't the second thing that I did. Or should I show you the wall first? I think I'll show you the wall because that also goes to the back. Alright, so this is one of 2 of the, I think I'm going to turn, no, that's a little too dark. So this is one of 2 of the back wall pieces. So if we're in the back of the van, there's actually my sister's painting in the background that's kind of blending into that, but it ends right there. Actually, one of the bolts fell off. I do have 4. Those are actually old differential bolts that I used that are attached there with Gorilla Glue. I may get nuts, and if I get the right size drill bit, I'll probably drill and tap those out and put a screw in them. Because this wood beam is actually bolted in 2 places now, and you can't tell because it's hidden under moss. Anyway, so this is like part of the wall, and then you can see how it turns into velvet. And then this would be, to the right would be like one of the big windows. So if you're in the back of the van, on top of that is the cabinet, and then that's where that door is. So that door is sitting in front of these. Originally I was going to cover these with a pattern or crushed velvet like everything else. But I said, it'd be neat if I could get like bricks, or I must have peeled that off. I don't know why that section, the mortar isn't black. I had to airbrush this stuff. So I came up with different ideas. Basically what I came up with was finding this kind of 3D relief wall, which is actually a latex, which isn't the greatest thing, and that's kind of the thing about doing arts or arts and crafts where some of your materials may not be as durable. That's why I like doing woodwork. this stuff kind of can be a little more obnoxious dealing with it. So, but that was the idea. So I covered this whole thing starting with this latex brick, which is 3D. It doesn't go down like very deep at all. It's maybe like a 1/16 or more of an inch. And then from there, I had to airbrush some shadow into it. Not a lot of attention to detail, but it definitely helped those bricks pop. So it's pretty cool looking. Also, like a little chintzy kind of Halloween decoration, but this is the element I was talking about where it's obviously artificial. From there, I had the idea to give it a, kind of a structural beam look, even though the thing with that is obviously it would be too heavy to have a full thickness, so it's just over 1/8 of an inch. But it's still a 3D relief from the brick. But it gives that look of maybe like a castle or dungeon in a typical kind of beam cross-section that you would see in medieval castles. From there, I decided to give it some moss, as obviously, I think that's the most obvious thing, was creating kind of moss and lichens, kind of making it look ancient, like it's grown in, it's never been fallen off the wall and stuff just keeps growing over it. The problem with this is when you're experimenting with a project like this is with this, it became a problem of sheer weight. And in certain spots, you may have latex that may start to come up and lose its adhesive. This is also somewhat incomplete. You can see how like that goes over. But what I had to do to get an actual 1-to-1 scale of real moss was build these mounds up in certain spots with like hot glue, and then from there I would flock that. And then there's a mix of certain elements to make it look wet. My favorite parts are like all around here. But some spots I have to fix. It's just the problem is you can't add less weight. And I did study moss patterns on brick walls. Like I took my time. You'll see all sorts of different species that may, like there's some that may cling into the mortar and do that. Others that don't go in the mortar at all and just kind of hang out over a brick. So I kind of mixed it up a little bit. It definitely ended up getting a little busy, but it's with a little touch up. I have to kind of, change a couple of things. The only other thing is adhesion to the brick is sometimes in certain spots it'll lift off. So other than that, I'm overall satisfied. The other side, I went with a little less to make it a little less extreme, but I really wanted to give it that kind of look of like it's never been touched at all, and it's just maybe been like this for centuries. So overall, it came out pretty believable. If I put it outside and kind of put it in the sun, or when it's in the van itself, like it looks like real moss, to the point where you start to realize the brick is latex and it starts to take away from that. So ideally, if you wanted to do this full blown, you would go with like that spot that has to be filled in around the corners, but the idea is like, if you wanted to go full blown, maybe like you could make a whole fiberglass sheet or carve it out of foam or something. So this was what I could create with finding stuff. And the only thing with, again, like the latex is it doesn't take long to kind of break down. I have clear coated and glazed this, and we'll probably put UV protectant on it. So that's the only thing I would say that worries me a little about that, because I want it to last at least long enough to have some fun with what's going on in there. So So that was a lot of fun actually to do. That was like kind of going back to elementary school arts and crafts, but it seems relatively easy, but I'll say you'd be surprised at how easy it is to screw up moss. That's why this one, there's a lot of things going on and changes, but that was also deliberate, like a lot of different colors, and you know, you can see where maybe it's flocked or where maybe it looks more wet or like a lichen or something. And, you know, definitely I had to study exactly what it looks like on a brick wall. So anyway, so that was that. And there's 2 of those, obviously one for each side. So I thought that was a lot of fun to do. To give it that stationary element, like, oh, there's a brick wall. What I may do is still, to take it even a step further, is to put curtains in front of this so that it could be exposed or hidden, which I thought was neat. So that's the wall. The other thing, I don't know if this concept started before the wall or whatever, but my other thing I'm pretty satisfied with. Probably my other favorite piece that I've created is my control board. And this has the problem with crushed velvet, or any velvet, is it likes to collect everything. So you just take some like tape and go over it if you need to clean up velvet, but you can see all the spots, or vacuum it maybe. Unfortunately, I couldn't find my 12-volt source to kind of do a little demo of the pilot lights, but now we're, you know, basically in the front of the van, and I needed something where I have a control board, so it would be like, you know, fog light, radiator fan, running board lights, etc., etc. And I was looking online, a lot of typical pre-made switches came with, you know, a flip-up toggle, maybe they had a pilot light or whatever, and they were very basic, and I could have used that, but you know what, in this project I had to take it too far. So firstly I said, no, I'm gonna do a push-pull switch, which were common in like 70s vehicles. I think my Ranchero had switches like this, and some of the stuff in the van is still, like the headlights are still pull, but it's all plastic. The cool thing with this is I have multiple knobs that I can use on this, and I forget the thread size, like 5/16 or something. So I have like wooden ones that I still haven't threaded, so I can have like stained round knobs, and I have like plastic phenolic ones that look like something out of a carnival, because they're all red. The other thing with these pilot lights is the company that makes these, as these would be typical for a tractor trailer, is, I don't want to lose that. Right now it's running purple lenses, but firstly they're incandescent, which I prefer to LED. LEDs are way too bright, but so I could change these to anything, like there's red, yellow. I'm not really a big Marvel person, but if you did multi, you could have like the gauntlet or whatever it's called from Thanos. So that was the original concept. Was I had the idea for 5 cool looking like and they're also jeweled, I guess you would call that. See how they're kind of hexagonal, so they're not round. So I thought that was cool. That was kind of like a, I guess, fantasy element, like treasure or something, but gems and whatnot. So I laid that concept out. The other concept I knew is I wanted to do brass stampings again, just like that being kind of the signature thing to do. Originally, when I finally built this, I had it was just the black velvet border and the red. Like, I knew I wanted black and red. Like, this was more of an evil element, going toward that kind of Dracula inspiration. I had different stampings. If you followed me, you may have seen different versions. Like, I even had a whole emblem that looked more like circus-like. So I couldn't make up my mind. Finally, I said, I gotta do, like, the Dracula thing. So, like, black border. I had an idea of, like, burgundy border with black center, and then what inspired this, out of all things, to do a black with a burgundy was ice cream. Is they used to have this ice cream, like Dracula, it was vampire themed or something, and it had a black outer shell, like a typical Eskimo bar, and then the middle was like a strawberry or raspberry red center to look like blood. And there's something about that contrast, like black and red is probably the best combination, and it's universally still themed for autumn or Halloween or something, even though it's like black and orange, but there's something more serious and sinister about black and burgundy like that. The other thing was finding what faces I was going to use. And these little guys I finally found, and they are period. They're almost 100 years old. They're 80 years old. But I found these on eBay listed as 1940s brass Masonic demon heads. And if you haven't seen these up close, they're pretty intense. But that's what those are. The resin you can see the line of resin, that's what that dark stuff is, but I wanted to make sure these weren't going to go anywhere. I didn't want to ruin them with putting a nail through them because they're actual antiques. And I have 3 of these, so there's one in a secret location, but I just thought those were way too cool. Period correct. Like, almost something out of, they reminded me almost of something that would be out of the same conceptualization as, like, the Mystic Seer from that Twilight Zone episode. And then I just found some kind of botanical looking, kind of Art Nouveau kind of corner stampings that had some patina to give it that look. And there's something about something that looks like it belongs at a grandparent's house that somehow becomes spooky or sinister. So that's like that Neo throwback I was talking about. I really am bummed out I couldn't do a demo at least of the cool purple pilot lights, but the camera probably won't show their true purple. So and then I basically made a casing for this so that it could sit like this. I may even be putting this up in the ceiling so it's facing down. So I'm not sure yet. It's a lot of wiring though. These are just the pilot light, and then to wire those up into a switch. What's going on here is I was experimenting, if you didn't see my video, I was experimenting with having this on a linear actuator and being able to come back and forth and reveal a secret compartment. The thing with that is you really need 2, and to do it where I wanted to do it is I can't fit 2. And everything I tried with only having 1, it just was really hard to get it balanced to where it would push. Like, you can even see when I push on that bracket, it wants to either come out that way or that way. So I probably could have engineered something a little better, but I may be moving this anyway, so I haven't thought about it. But this thing, I love this, and again, like, especially with the tricolor, I was going to stay with just black and red, but I had to I was like, I've got to throw purple in there. There's something about eggplant purple that's really sinister and kind of goes with, kind of universally with hot rod stuff, so I'm pretty satisfied with this. Very overkill way to have accessory switches, but that's the whole point of the whole project, is nothing is supposed to be simple, it's all supposed to be grandiose and shown in great detail. So that was the first thing that I did that had an electronics element to it. I even thought of like having a secret start sequence for the truck, like when you have a dizzy switch, so kind of like, it also reminds me, another influence for all of this was like Resident Evil, but particularly Resident Evil 4. A lot of the old world Spanish elements in the castle and stuff like that. So I just thought it was pretty twisted to actually add an element of something dark with like actual demonic heads, because it's kind of spooky enough even if those weren't there. I thought about flocking where the resin line is, but it's not that, like when you see this in person, it's like, yeah, you can kind of see that dark line where it was wet, but it doesn't take much away from it. So that's the switchboard, or master control, basically. So that was that. I actually have thought of, just like everything else, something always ends up getting added, as I may be adding something to this. I'm not going to say what it is, but I may be adding a couple of more embellishments to this and making it even more ridiculous, just kind of kicking it up a notch. Okay, so next are elements of fretwork, which fretwork is when you make, you take a scroll saw and you're basically making a pattern just like a jack-o'-lantern. I love how this double dragon turned out, because it kind of looks like a face. Like, see the nose and the mouth and everything. This was a little too thick for the application. Where this was intended to go was possibly on the side of my CB cabinet. Oh, actually there are embellishments I forgot about that I haven't, those aren't installed. I could have showed those, but they're just little scrolls that go on the ceiling. So this was like the next thing that I was working on while I was working on wood carving, which I haven't done any carvings for this yet. Then I was experimenting with patterns, so I thought about using this on the side. This isn't glazed or anything, is why it looks kind of rough. Both of the, like, this was definitely an 8-hour job. I want to say I did like a 4-hour afternoon, and either came back again at night or the next day to finish it. But it's not like I'm going to throw this away. Oh, and this is actually just pallet wood. This is wood from like a make-your-own clock kind of wood templates, and this is actually from a pallet. So the next design I had was this, where I'm using the same dragon that you just saw in the double dragon, a medieval dragon, and then kind of a stained glass or gothic kind of cross, which I tried to stay away from any religious elements. The only problem with using this piece and putting it on the side was I realized it's unbalanced, and it should be like a triptych where there's two dragons holding a cross, so it'd be something, well, obviously the dragon would be the other way, but you get the idea. So they're both looking behind them as if they're protecting this, and I don't know, I may still use this pattern, I may change the cross pattern. This one was pretty tricky, and you can see it was easy to get thin enough to cut through, but it looks really cool that way, like it's been aged. And this again was easily an 8+ hour, like probably the window itself could have been a 6 to 8 hour job, and then the dragon several hours. Let's see the back, unfinished. But yeah, I may, if I do this again for the CB cabinet, I'll add a third dragon that'll fill more of the side of it. So that's fretwork so far. I don't have the scrolls to show or the embellishments in the ceiling, but I will show. Alright, so that's, filmed that. I guess I'll show something that I did for, that's based, just modifying the original wood. So this is not my cut, but something that I can give you an idea of that I've modified. So this is like the curtain valance that goes over the big windows. There's 3 of these. It has a really nice glaze on it. So all I did with this is sand down the the original stain, redo it in a Cabernet. Then the really tricky and fun part was hand lining this with acrylic paint, and sometimes I don't use tape, so a lot of times I try to because I can get pretty shaky, and I don't have a liner brush. Then you'll notice there is brass filigree that's also custom. I originally found these little screws, but to be more correct, I started changing them out for flathead brass screws, because these aren't actually brass, so this is just to make it look proper, basically. Then in the middle, this one needs to be reattached, of course. The middle was originally gray, and you can't really tell, but it's got a nice foam underlayment that when this is pressed in there makes a really nice curvature. And because this is crushed velvet, you see from any angle that you change as the velvet takes on a new look. This velvet too is I only have one strip left of it, and the problem with ordering velvet is sometimes they change the dye color and you can't get the exact color. This color was chosen and based exactly on furniture out of Cochem Castle in Germany. So I was very specific with this particular green to make it match things that exist on real furniture in a real castle. So that was lucky that I am able to finish these like valances. Now this is real brass. This is filigree. I'm not sure on the age. You'll see other filigree in the truck, on the ceilings, on the beams, that is almost 100 years old. This, I want to say, is later, but it may be done in a kind of, I don't know really at what point of the 20th century it technically is, but what this actually is used for, and once I tell you, you may be like, oh yeah, is to wrap around antique lamps. So if you have like a table lamp, this would normally kind of wrap around it basically as a, you know, as a piece of decor, an embellishment, if you will. And this has an organic element. It has a botanical element. Like they're kind of like flowers going on here. You know what would be really cool that I've just realized is if you look at the top of this, it's a cylinder. You know what I may have to do with this is run some electroluminescent wire through this so that it lights up. I don't know why I hadn't thought of that. I thought about it recently. I haven't bothered to stain the top. That's actually probably going to get painted black, but I can run a wire through this and actually make that illuminate. That'd be pretty cool, right? On top of the other things going on with the limo lights. But this is an example of modifying the factory wood to kind of be at least color coordinated or kind of match to the rest of the theme of what's going on. So see, we have burgundy. Olive green is the least amount of color, but burgundy, black, eggplant are the three kind of main colors going on. And then this is technically Cabernet. That's burgundy. But I also chose and love this filigree on here because it's not like, alright, like you can choose to have a face of a beast and be like, oh, it's obviously like that's a little unrealistic. Like there's no castle. Maybe these obviously existed in the 40s, which is kind of creepy. The other reason why I chose those, if you've ever watched The Burbs, this kind of reminded me of the furnace from The Burbs when they have a crematorium in their basement, and that like demon that they have on there. So I know, like, okay, Hellcat obviously is using the red eye uses like a demon face, but I don't care about that stuff. I pay like no attention to modern muscle crap, but that's the only thing I can think of where that's actually being used. But what I loved about these is that they're very soft, right? And in having it that way, that almost becomes creepier because it's supposed to be inviting, but it's kind of eerie. Like, again, it's like a grandmother's house, or at least like an older world grandmother's house. So that was deliberate. The other filigrees are a little less soft, but I thought that was kind of funny to do, to mix that in. I thought that was a little creepier than having one that like looks gothic and evil and stuff like that. So that was an example of modifying the original elements. The last thing I have... Or wait, I've got two more things. There's one thing I'll save for last because it's kind of the other element of the truck. Alright, this is a big pile of velvet. What this is, these have all been pre-cut, but these are the actual curtains, and the camera is showing the burgundy a little lighter than what it is. These are the rear curtains, so those have been done in eggplant. Again, it's just kind of the universal kind of, it's like a hot rod color, but, you know, definitely themed toward the dark side, I would say. These are actually stitched and have holes ready to go. I'm using like a $15 sewing machine, and it's the first time I've ever done it, so they're not great. You can still see the cuts on the seam, which I don't know, I'm going to trim that, but I thought about using a purple acrylic or black acrylic just to be able to hide that, like a fabric paint. And these, I believe, are all cut to be double-sided, which I may change to save material, but basically both sides are velvet, so no light gets through, but these, the burgundy, are what go under that valance. So it should look really nice in there. A lot of red going on, but that's kind of the idea. So I've got to finish these, but they are cut to the original curtains. I think I may need more. I think there's like a couple of curtains missing still, but most of those are already pre-cut. So the final thing is not exactly within the same theme, but it did have some decisions where I had a certain idea and shape in mind to do it. But the thing to keep in mind is, even though there's medieval elements going on, there's also kind of a chrome element up front going on, like the machine side of the truck. And I've used a lot of influence because of the truck's style up front, like it has those cigarette windows or whatever those windows are called, and chrome mirrors and stuff that hadn't changed from the 50s to the 80s. I did a lot of things up front, like my rear view mirror is chrome, the tachometer is chrome. I have to repaint the gauge pods, but I did try and still throw an automotive side, so it's not just fully like you're riding around in a castle. So it still had to be like a truck, unapologetically. But the one thing I thought of for this next thing was more like a science fiction kind of 50s space age, 50s, 60s space age shape and look to go with that chrome, and kind of like to bring out the fantasy. And what that was were my actual tweeter pods here, which this is incomplete. I do have to repaint these, but you can kind of see it becomes like almost like Masters of the Universe, where you have those elements of like space age stuff mixed with medieval. It's blended in nice overall when you're in the truck, like nothing's really clashing, but I kind of wanted to shape these out in a way where it's like the day the earth stood still, like that kind of thing. Like, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. How this is art, well, this was actually a pain in the butt, but basically what this is it starts with a wooden pattern that I scrolled out, and then from there it's basically just body filler, and actually even some masking tape to fill in the gap here because the wood is only going to fit so far. There was still, it didn't come out perfect. Like, there was still a couple pores. I don't really care at all. It's more about the tweeters. These are my nice Pioneer Z-Series components, and the tweeters I just had to make ear level. I did put them that specific, too, to where I carved a notch for the screw, and that just kind of gives them almost like a factory look. Toward the windshield that you're not going to see, like, you can see, like, that's why I really hate using body filler, honestly, but you can see there's like a line where you can see the wood, but you're never going to see that. You'd have to look in through the windshield and, like, you know what I mean? So it's acceptable for me. This side there's absolutely nothing, so that came out nice. And then that, how it sits is basically like that, so that's how you'll see it from one side or the other. But that was the shape that I thought of, was kind of like a 60s idea of space age and aerodynamics. It's like, it also kind of made me think of, what's the Star Cruiser in like Phantom Menace? It kind of looks like that, but that was the idea there, was to kind of have a little fun with it and give it a shape, because it didn't need to be that large, obviously, because the whole tweeter is right there. But I did, you know, the wood is screwed in, and then those are out a little bit, and then the wire can tuck into the screw, so it just helps with putting the pillar back on. And then this is the original color that you see on the back, so I'll probably just finish it in the original gray and, you know, mask this off. But this is a Duplicolor Chrome, is I did put a primer coat under it. I don't really care that it's not perfectly mirrored. It's tricky to work with, like, there's better paints, like this could be buffed to a better shine maybe even, but I'm not worried about it. I still think they look pretty cool, and it just looks better than if I just, you know, put the wood on there with the tweeter and it wasn't painted. So it was just kind of a way to give some space age quality to it, make it look pretty cool and unique. So anyway, that is kind of all for now. Most of the talking was kind of more about, you know, doing the kind of the whole, talking about the whole concept of the van, like how certain things came to be, which I haven't really done. Like, I've made a lot of posts through the years on doing this, but I haven't really sat down and like showed things and spoke from an artistic perspective of why I'm doing certain things. There are times where I look at this and I'm like, wow, it's been 5 years. Is this a waste of time? Like, what am I doing? And I don't think so, because I'm still like producing or making art at the same time as making like kind of a fun vehicle that also is a toy. It's still practical, but I just kind of wanted to mix both worlds, and then we'll see by the time, hopefully I'm done with, and it's running soon enough, but when that comes, hopefully I remember why I got a van to begin with, which originally the whole plot of the whole thing was to have like a film truck, to be able to like take people or friends around in kind of like style and have fun with it, you know, sort of like a really crazy limousine. Other than that, like, it is what it is. Like, I haven't been making a lot of videos lately. I have touched my camera. I haven't been playing with lenses. I haven't even done interior stuff really since winter, as far even like paint. Well, I did stain one thing. I had to restain something, but I've been focused more on the mechanical. Like, obviously now all the suspension is done. The new brakes are mostly set up. The rear end is restored and ready. So right now I have to get back to, rust removal, finish the body insulators, then I can put the transmission in and then build the engine and put that in, and from there. And then I'll probably get back to working on interior stuff. But I do when I can, when I feel like it sometimes, or what I've had the time for. Like with this, it's been kind of about, for me it was kind of like, I have to have the passion. Like when I built these doors, I was just ready to go, I was in the mood, and it came out awesome. If you're not in the mood for something, like, it's gonna come out poor and you're not gonna love it, or you're not gonna take your time on it. So it's a labor of love. But it is. So even though time has flown by and I've been like very reclusive, I'm still producing art. Like, I'm still being able to flex some creativity, even though I'd prefer, I think I'm a little burnt out from certain video stuff. The world has kind of changed overnight to where everyone is a video maker, everyone's doing a TikTok. So if you were making content before, which for me now it's spanned well over a decade, but things change. So I think to work in the tangible rather than sitting in front of an editor was good, and I was able to kind of go back to some old things, learn some new things, and ultimately produce kind of a vision. And at the end of, or the new beginning rather, is it'll be basically like a personal thrill ride, or anyone that wants to kind of have fun and cruise around. That's kind of what this is all about. It's not... I'm not a car community person. I'm not a street racer. Like, this is to totally come out of outer space with a vehicle. And even though it's not entirely new, it's not like I built this new concept of a vehicle. Like, vans are even relatively popular right now, but, and I'm a competitive person, so this does have to do with trying to like make a show out of it and have something that you're proud of and can show off. So in the end, I'm sure 5 years will not feel like that big of a deal, but I try to push a lot of attention to detail so that when it is done, it's kind of surreal and I'm like, oh wow. But overall, I'm satisfied with the art direction of where I went. Like with the interior, there's even decisions on the outside that could technically be considered art, but even right now, like looking at this in contrast to the other things, I'm like, that's pretty cool. I'm basically like being an adult child. Like, there's space age and medieval castle stuff, but this is basically it's my version. If I were production designer of like Disney, to where this would kind of be my take on creating fantasy, to where it's real enough to where you're like, wait a minute, is that a real antique? But it's just silly enough to where it's obviously make-believe. And that's kind of the idea. The other thing I'll say in closing is, yes, sometimes, like, as a man, some of the design decisions, or even playing with velvet, as you feel like, oh, is this emasculating me? I think as an artist, you wouldn't think that about anything that you're doing, but as a man, and it being like an automobile, and particularly like a souped up kind of truck, is you quickly realize as soon as you apply that V8 machismo to all of this stuff becomes that much cooler and kind of creepy if you think about it. That's why if you think of the Munsters coach, if you saw that vehicle and it weren't for having a 289 with zoomies sticking out of it, is you might find it kind of amusing, right? Like, yeah, it's a Model T mixed with I forget what it, but it's a mix of two Fords. But the funny thing is like, you may laugh at it or think that it's too frilly until you hear that kind of engine. So the funny thing is that as I've gone along and done like doing dragons and stuff, like medieval dragons, is I kind of laugh and kind of think, all right, people, there's probably someone laughing at me and picking on me, but I'll tell you what, is as soon as you apply that to the nature of the machine, is it becomes a whole different element of kind of like what the whole thing is. And to me, it's basically a thrill ride. It's like having a big mobile dark ride and so on. And that's why I've taken this stuff so far. And stuff like this I try to build as sturdy as possible. Some stuff like the wall, that could be stronger, so it's a lot of trial and error sometimes. And even why I've used, this is upholstery velvet, so using this as curtains, like that, stuff like that, things that you'll learn along the way, is you'll realize that it's, you want to make everything as indestructible and long-lasting as possible. That's why this also has like 12 coats of glaze on it, and the camera is not, well, maybe right there you can tell, but it's in person, it's like a Chris Craft or something. So anyway, I mean, it's far from over even in the interior, but I figured it would be cool to make kind of a 4 or 5 year journal and kind of show. And again, not everything is here. There's a bunch of stuff inside the truck already that maybe I'll film and then like narrate over. But there's a few more things I've got to do in there and get this thing finished. But I'm already I'm working on my fuel lines. On top of that, like I really just need like a battery, some oils, maybe some heater hoses, charcoal can for evap stuff. But the vision is very much that close to being realized and being kind of in a Lego assembly kit almost, of like, all right, now you just have to put all the pieces together. So it's been a long road. And I've done literally everything myself. I've had a couple friends help with, like, once, a couple times I needed some acetylene. Friends have been there with, like, a few parts and tools, absolutely. But all the labor and everything, like, it's just been me. So it's a lot to take on, from the kind of sciences of mechanical engineering and precision to producing like art like this or woodwork or whatever it is for it. So but it's totally worth it. Like when I sit here and I look at this and I'm like, oh cool, that was my idea of fantasy and here it sits. So you can do anything you want to do. Like, you could find wood for free. Even if you're like sprucing up your room, or if you can't afford antiques and you want people to think that you're wealthy, it's not that difficult. Like, I would say you definitely need some talent and artistic skill to be able to have the patience, because there's certain things that are gonna suck. I mean, even staining wood can be a pain in the ass if you don't know what you're doing. Other than that, it's nothing that it really takes where you need to be a master of anything. Just these pods I had to like redo a few times, or like sand body filler and redo them. So if you're into arts and crafts, like, you'll be right at home. But the point is, like, pick your vision. If it's, medieval or antiques, you can absolutely do it, and it's fun as hell to make things that are aged, or antiquing things, basically. And if you'll notice, too, is I put detail in this where that's a combination paint on all the sides, where I kind of wanted a patina to gold. So even though you probably won't be able to tell in the truck, but it's got like this green gold, and it kind of shimmers when you look at it the right way. So you can see probably on the outer edge a little better, but that's all it takes, is keep adding your layers on, and you'll get there. So I'll say, 4 or 5 years, yeah, like all this stuff at once, if I were doing it over summer, is different, but over the course of time, while working the mechanical element and restoration element, it's still pretty cool to see all this stuff kind of add up that you did yourself. So now I'm probably starting to sound arrogant or cocky, which I'm not. I'm very humble. I don't, like I said, anyone can really do it, but it's, really the drive and vision to want to do it, and being obsessed. Like, if you're obsessed with like old Disney stuff, is go make your own. That's all there is to it. I've had times where I don't get a lot of attention for my work, even on my old Facebook, and I may think something looks great, and like I said, someone could be laughing or mocking me, and I'm like, well, whatever. At least I'm doing something other than watching TikTok. So, and I'm not judging anyone else, I'm just saying, like, at least I'm trying to build a three-dimensional world, and design something old world into it. So, anyway, that's all. I just thought I would kind of give you a piece of my mind with where this has been, where it's going, and hopefully it'll be a really cool conclusion when I am done. And I guess I'll end it on that note. So, see you later.